Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Srini here, and if you're new to this channel, just go ahead and subscribe to it and hit the bell to get notifications. So here you'll be getting a lot of free videos on Java, Selenium, API automation, interview questions, and also on Python. So in this particular video, we are going to look at the part 2 of the Selenium automation framework. So we have looked at the framework structure in a previous video, and this is going to be the first framework which I'm going to explain you all, that is data-driven framework. So of course, you all would have a lot of questions in mind when you all hear about this terminology, data-driven framework. You might have heard already about it in interviews as well as in your projects. So what is this data-driven framework all about? So we are going to look at some key aspects of this in this part 1 video. So this video would be covering what is data-driven framework, what are the components of a data-driven framework. I'll explain you all from a coding perspective, what are the different components, how to read the data from an external Excel sheet, and we are going to use Apache POI to do that. So that is all we'll be covering as a part of this video. So let's get on to the practical part directly. So this is the framework which I had created the structure in my last session. You all can just go over my previous video in case you all haven't already gone over it, right? And I've already configured the libraries which I have already added here. These are the complete Selenium libraries, what all we will be requiring if we want to do any kind of an operation with respect to Selenium. So if you all want this library jar, do let me know in comments, and I will be happy to share with you all, and I'll upload in my GitHub, right? So we are going to have Apache POI libraries here. We are having Selenium Java. We are having Log4j. So we are having all the required libraries, whatever we'll be requiring to do any kind of a testing. Of course, this is with respect to UI, not with respect to any kind of a API. For API, there are different set of jar files we'll be requiring to add to our project. So already those of jars are already added to the project. If you can see, the reference libraries is already referenced. So we are good to go from a jars perspective. Now let's look at the different components of a data-driven framework. And firstly, what is a data-driven framework, right? So a data-driven framework is a mechanism through which your framework will be able to do automation of your manual regression test cases, or maybe later on when your functional test cases become stable, or end-to-end test cases, right? In a way that it reads the test data of the test cases from an external file. Now you all can have a query in mind that what this external file could be. It could be any file. It could be like just a file, whatever we are having. Let me show you example. If this you see, properties file is going to be a file, right? The type is a file. So you can store the test data here as well. You can store the test data also maybe in a database, retrieve it from the database, or you can also store data into a most commonly used way across multiple projects, that is through an Excel sheet. So that is why if you see in my test data, I'm having a .xlsx file. Now Apache POI is a jar file which has got different classes which are required to do interaction with the Excel sheet, right? It has got different classes which will interact with your Excel sheet, and it is going to expect that the Excel sheet which you are trying to reference is either having .xlsx format or .xls format. Only these two formats is supported by Apache POI, right? And there are different other libraries which are going to have interaction with Excel, like JXL library, etc. But we are going to stick to Apache POI because it's the most widely used and more popular, and it has got a lot of advantages as well. So we will look at that when we start doing the coding. So this is a different structure of the framework. So if you still don't have any idea, you can go across my previous video. I'm not going to repeat that because already I've explained in detail about the structure of the framework in my previous video. So let's get on to the coding part. So this is a base class. This is going to be the main class across my entire framework. So whatever initialization things are there, or whatever common utilities are there, we would be preferably having it all as a part of our base class. Now the reason behind this strategy is that we will make our other classes like home page, login page, sign up page, even the basic utils, and even our test cases, home page test, etc. Java, right? All of them we are going to make it extends base class. So that's the idea behind it. So we want that whatever common features we have already included in base class, these classes would then inherit those properties or those methods, and they should just be able to directly use it. And we are going to make most of the methods as static, so we don't have to initialize or create an object and then access the method via the object. That is not required. So we are going to do all of that in this particular session. So let's see what all things are required when you try to do some coding in your base class. So we don't require firstly the main method. So let's remove it. Okay. Now what is that we are going to have? We are basically having a properties object. Okay. We are having a file input stream. We are having a file. We are having a driver. So what am I trying to do here? My first aim is to ensure that I read this external file, right? I have to first make a connection with the external file. And of course, with Apache POI later on, I'll be having a separate method written to read the data from external file. Okay, but where is that I would know which particular path this Excel file is getting located in my current project, right? So that is, I have to define it in my configure property. So configure properties has got different properties. If you already have a look at my three variables which I have defined in the config properties, I have Chrome driver path. That is the path at which I will be having my Chrome driver stored in my project. So I'm already having as a part of my project. I don't want to have it accessed within someone's machine. I don't want that to happen. So I'm directly adding it as a part of my project framework. Then I am having a path for which is the path at which your log4j file is present. So this is the path. And then finally I'm having the test data file path. That is where is my XLS sheet stored, XLSX in this scenario, right? It's stored here. So I've given the path. Now again, this particular practice also we would be avoiding in future to give the complete path. Rather than that, we are going to use the current working directory, that is data driven scratch lecture, and then we are going to reference from src till our file. So let's see how we can do that. So for that to happen, you just have to mention only the path which is coming from your src. So I'm going to remove the other ones, and I'll tell you all how we can make that happen, right? So you can just keep it from here, remove the path before that. Okay, this is going to be always a good practice, because this is going to be the common path no matter in whoever's machine they have imported this framework. It's not going to change, because we can just consider that similar to like a relative export, right? We never change the path which is coming after the relative reference. The before that we don't care what is the path, etc. If this is giving us a unique locator, we just are concentrating on that. Similar to that, we want this particular path to always remain the same, because it's a part of the framework. The before this path, it's going to be the current working directory of the respective persons, whoever is imported in the framework. So we are having a syntax for that. We'll look at that. Now let's come to here. Yeah, so we have to import this base class. That's what is the error given here. Now let's come to base class. Now, what is that we're going to do? Right. So we of course are going to initialize the base class, and we are going to start doing something here. We're going to read the property. We are going to do some file initialization, etc. So firstly, what we will do is we will have to have a method created. So let's have a method created to read the property, or let's say initialize the file property. We'll say initialize property. We're having a method, and we are going to make it as static and void. Whenever you make a method as static, then if at all it uses any variable, it has to also be static. So I am going to first establish a connection with my test data Excel sheet, or what you could say that I'm going to find a way of establishing a connection, like a path at which my file is located. So for that, I need to have an object of file equal to new file. Now in bracket, we have to give the file path. This is a syntax for a file, right? Now the file path is already present in my test data file path, but I don't want to hard code any of this in my as a part of my code. So I want to access the file path. I have not yet established a connection with the config properties, right? I've not established a connection with the config properties. So the one way is that I hard code the path of wherever config properties is present. Means whichever location config properties is present, I can hard code as a part of my base class. Let's say I don't want to do that approach. So one approach could have been, you have to just mention like this. I'm telling you all the approaches because you need to understand what is recommended, what is not recommended, and you should stick on to the recommended approach only. So one way could have been directly copy this entire path. Okay. Now I'll customize it a bit like this, because this is establishing the complete file path property, right? Wherever my config properties is present. And as I was telling you all that we should not hard code the current working directory, because that's going to be different for everyone's machine, right? So for that, what we will do is we are going to use a system property, system dot get property. System dot get property and user dot directory, and then you are going to append your remaining path. So this will give you the directory location till here. I'll just show you all till here. That's it, the current working directory. And then you're giving the forward slash so that you would be able to access the remaining part, right? So now it is going to form a complete path. If still we are not sure what would be the path form, no worries. You can just create a variable called file path and you can store this entire thing. If you don't want it to look clumsier inside this parenthesis, you can do cut paste and put it here and just mention the file path. Looks good. Yeah. So now let's go further. What else we would want to have here? Now we are going to create an object of file input stream, because we're going to read the data from a file, right? So we need to create a file input stream. So this is a syntax to do that. And for that, you have to give the file from which you want to read the data. So I have given the file, but again, it's going to ask me to do exception handling, because what if this is going to be a checked exception type? So like a file not found exception, right? So it's going to ask me to handle this exception. So either I can do throws clause at the method declaration level here, or I can handle with try catch. Now again, if you have not watched my exception handling videos on Java, I would strongly recommend go and watch Java tutorial videos and come back to this session. But just for explaining you all, try catch is like you're doing the exception handling then and there itself. You're not postponing the exception handling to a future instance. But if you do throws clause, right, that means you are telling to the calling method that I'm just throwing this exception, you take care of handling it. So if you, that's not a recommended approach, guys. We should always handle the exception then and there itself. So we will be doing try catch. So we are going to say file not found exception. So I hope you all are getting what I'm trying to do here. Caught and initialize. So always make it a practice that you mention which particular method and which exception you have caught, so that while running the project, if you encounter any issue, it's easy to debug where exactly the issue is found out. Okay, and if you want to know what is that particular exception, then you can just leave a space here and just say dot get message. Yeah, that's it. So it has handled the exception now. And another good practice is that always try to put everything inside try catch block. So that way, if any kind of exception is encountered, right, you are getting it handled in the catch block. And for that, you need to have one more catch block, because this is specific to file not found, right? What if any other exception is found? So I need to have another exception, which is a generic exception. And you can of course use throwable as well, which is the parent of exception class. But for now, let's use exception. Okay. Fine. So try catch block is done. We have closed the method, and for this, I'll just say exception. And we would like to know what is exception. So that's all. Now you need to also initialize properties variable, right? Prop equal to, yeah. So you need not say properties prop. Already I have made it as a global variable above. So I'm going to remove this file input stream file and even this file, but it's going to throw me error. If you see, it's showing in red side. The reason is because I'm trying to access a non-static variable from a static method. Now that is not allowed in Java. You can access a static variable only from a static method. If in case you were to access a non-static variable, then you have to create a non-static method. And that non-static method can even access static variables also. Even though that is not recommended, but that's how the syntax goes in Java. So better that you make this as static and static. And since we are going to use inheritance later on, we would be requiring them to be also public. So Let's make it as public. If you don't want to make it as public, if you want to make it as private, then there is another approach, guys. For that, I'll have a separate video. For that, you need to have a getter and setter. You will have to make these three variables as private, then make them as private, and then have getter and setter. So always the different classes, they can inherit the methods, right? We are going to have methods as public anyways. So we will be having a get prop method, get file input string variable method, get file method. So like that, we'll have to access it. So that is not required for now. So let's stick on to this approach. So prop equal to new properties. Yeah. Now you have to first load the input stream. So we are going to say prop dot load the input stream. So this input stream is going to get the key and value pair, whatever your file is having. So let's load this input stream. So we are going to load the FIP. But once you have loaded, that's all we need to do? No, right? We have to also read the property from the properties file, the config properties file, because we are establishing the connection with config properties file here, because we have hard coded currently. Now there is another approach here. If you don't want to hard code, you can create a constants Java file. It could be an interface also, because interface, the variables are final by default. But if you want to use constants file, you can go for constants. So here what I'll be having is, again, I'm going to have a similar approach. I'm going to make it as final. So I'm going to say public final. And what is the data type we are going to have? We are going to have string config file path and just store it. Right? And yeah, make it as static as well. So that way we can directly say constants dot config file path. We don't have to worry about anything else, right? And what we will do is, since all of the remaining classes are going to inherit your base class, right? Okay, let's look at the other approach in the meantime. So what we will do is, first we will stick to base class. So here we want to access the constants file, right? We don't want to write the config properties, this entire hard coding like this. So let's do one thing. Let's just say constants dot. Okay, so this is going to be a a system defined class. So better rename it, so avoid confusion. And we'll go back here and we'll say constants file. Okay, so it's not able to access it because it's not able to understand what is the directory it is present in. So what I would do is, I can either make it as a part of my base class package. So I'll make it as a part of my base class package. Constants file. Now let's try one more time. Yeah. So it's able to access it now because it's in the same package. So in case if it is the case that you want to have it as a part of another package, then you have to do one more thing. You have to make it like this. Import config start. Okay. Now I'll make it removed and make it as a part of config package. I'll show them how it is done, because you already saw if it's a part of the same package, you can directly access via constants file dot. Now let's try. See, it's able to get you the config file path because you have already imported the another package config.star. If you had have made this as commented, see, it's giving you error because it's not able to understand where is this file present, and it's of course giving you suggestion input constants file. So you have imported the constants file, but if you want to import everything, you can make star here. That's all you want to do, right? So you don't need, especially for this, any inheritance of your base class with your constants file, not required. You can directly access like this way also. So we are going to use config file path, and that's it. Now you have not done any hard coding in your project framework, and you have got everything from your external files, so that in future if anything has to change, you don't have to change in your code. You just have to change in your either an interface or a constants file or a config properties. That's it. You're minimizing your amount of changes required. Correct? Now there is just one more thing required, that is to read the property from the properties file, because already we have established and we have loaded the file input stream. We just have to read the property, but we will not do as a part of this method, because we want to always keep that reading property separate. I'm going to say public static string get property. I'm going to create a method, but of which particular attribute you want to read the property. So you want to have a key, right, given by the user, and you want to get the property for that. So for that, I will say return. Since prop is a global variable, I'm going to say prop dot. There is a method within properties class that is called get property, and just give the key. That's it. So we have returned the property which is in the form of, let's say, string format. See, get property is returning you string, and you return the string variable here, right? So these two methods are required to be a part of our base class constructor. So what we would do as a part of our base class constructor, first thing is that we are going to have our driver instance initialized. So always make it a good practice that you have the driver variable passed, and you just make it equal to your current instance should have your driver variable which is being passed, and then you just call this method initialize prop so that these global variables get the values whichever is required for initialization purpose. And since it's a static method, I can directly access it. And what else? Of course, the general convention goes that you should do it last name dot, but again, directly we can access it like this way as well. We don't have to create the object. And once that is done, then you need not even have it any get property as a part of this. This is all required for you to initialize the properties file. So any particular class, whichever is extending your base class, let's say home page, if it requires any kind of property to be read, it just has to directly, it can access. So I'll show you how. Import the base class. Okay, let's say, okay, so this is a constructor which has to call its parent constructor. So of course you would need to have then all of them having a driver and make a call to your super class and pass the driver variable, right? Because it's doing inheritance. So in inheritance, your subclass has to call the superclass constructor, and this is always has to be the first syntax in your subclass constructor, and then you can follow it with any other line of statements, whatever you want. Now, what is the error we are getting here? Yeah, constants file, right? We have renamed the file to constants.java. This is all good, and yeah, this also has to have a constructor, so we are going to have it similarly, and we call our base class constructor, right? And you're going to import it. So we have seen now that how the base class code can be written in as a part of this lecture, and I don't want to make you all more confused as a part of entire data-driven framework in one video. I want to split it up into different parts so that you'll understand it part by part and thoroughly. So we look at the next part as to how we can read the data from an Excel sheet, and later on we'll follow it up with writing the data to Excel sheet and then common utilities of the Excel sheet as a part of the data-driven framework. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this video and have learned a lot of concepts. So do like my video and share with your friends, and do subscribe to my channel if you haven't done yet. Thank you so much, guys.